Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on Towards a Sustainable Coffee Future in Asia, Climate Threats, Tech, and Transparency. And as coffee is becoming a key commodity for Southeast Asia, worth $6.2 billion or 16% of the world's coffee exports, we are exploring what the industry is able to do to become more sustainable. And especially with the COVID pandemic now in play, we are going to ask experts on what is the future of coffee in Asia. We ask whether addressing sustainability issues will transform the entire coffee sector or lead to market differentiation. We will draw on the latest research data on coffee in Asia, and the expert panel will discuss how COVID has accelerated the need to improve sustainable practices, increase consumer confidence through progressive transparency, and unlock innovation in the manufacturing process. So join us for this exchange. To start with, I'd like to set the tone by inviting our speaker from Mordor Intelligence, the research manager for food and agriculture, Mr. Avinash Desamangala. Avinash, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Patricia. Thank you for that wonderful welcome.
Yeah, could you give us, a bird's eye view, if you will, of the scene or the coffee scene in Asia?
Sure. I have my presentation in detail, but if you would just want a one sentence, I think it's a very robust pipeline that we are looking at in the future. If you go 5 years down the line, it's a very robust growth rate that at least we are predicting for Asia. Dominated by, of course, two countries, India and China. But if you consider especially Southeast Asia, there's a lot of potential there in terms of growth of a few segments, especially the out-of-home coffee segment, which has been dominating or which has been growing a lot in the last 5 years. But of course, in a lot of specialty coffee and those kind of niche and premium segments, there is a lot of scope that we are seeing 5 years down the line. And despite being struck by a pandemic.
I will let you meet the rest of the panelists. We have from Indonesia, we have Leo Purba Wiryajaya from Sumatra. Leo? There's Leo.
Hello, everyone.
How are you dealing with the crisis there in Sumatra? I'm sure you have a lot of stories to tell.
Oh, yes, we do. Thank you for inviting me
to
join this webinar.
Thank you.
And a lot of stories that I can tell from Sumatra.
Okay, so we'll hear more from you later, Leo. And of course, from Vietnam, I'd like you to meet Dave Daze, the regional manager and consultant for a lot of coffee projects. And he's been in Asia for some time now. So Dave, would you like to greet our audience?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for the Asian Coffee Federation to have me in this webinar. Hope you're gonna enjoy it.
Yes, and for something new about sustainability, of course, we have to keep up with the trends. And we are joined today by the CEO of Farmer Connect, Mr. Michael Chrisman. Michael?
Thank you so much for the greetings, Pasita, and it's a privilege to be amongst such experienced people within the region. I'm particularly happy at Farmer Connect because we provide technology, we provide end-to-end traceability solution through blockchain. And I've heard about Sumatra and I've heard about Vietnam, and actually I have already two products which you can see here from two well-known companies, UCC and Hema, who are tracing their Vietnam and Sumatra coffee with Farmer Connect technology. So we're in context, and I really look forward to our discussion and what's possible.
Thank you, Michael.
In the region.
Perfect that we have Indonesia and Vietnam here in our panel. So to set the tone, as I said, can we have Avinash to give us as they say, the lay of the land in coffee?
Thank you so much, Pasita. I'll just share my screen to show the presentation. So thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. And coffee is, like Pasita said in the introduction, a very important commodity as far as the world is concerned. And it's very important, especially in Asia, because of the kind of farmers who are growing coffee, smallholder farmers mostly. And the future of coffee, it will be a huge step in the future of these farmers. So today we are talking about the towards a sustainable coffee future in Asia, climate threats, tech, and transparency. And I'll just set the tone today by pointing out a few data points which might be of interest to for the other panel members, just to put an emphasis on how important sustainability is, how important the coffee market is for Asia. If you look at the last year, we were struck by a pandemic, but despite that, coffee market has seen robust growth. And we are expecting as researchers that this trend is going to continue well into the future. It was a stable growth at best, despite challenges. So the channels like food service were completely closed for most part of 2020, but despite that, we've seen good amount of growth. If you see long-term positive growth trend, non-traditional markets or tea drinking markets of China and India have seen the westernization trend. We've seen that over the past almost 10 years or so. However, craft and single origin coffee segments are the biggest growth story, especially in a big market like India, where there is an increased penetration of direct to consumer channels that we are seeing. In terms of on trade is what is dominating this market. So if you see, almost 85% of the market is on trade, which is supermarkets, hypermarkets, convenience stores, and of course online retail that is coming up in a big way. The online channels specifically, they're projected to have the fastest compound annual growth rate over the forecast period, which is for the next 5 years. And these channels, I think, set the tone for this entire discussion, where they serve as the ideal point or ideal channel to promote sustainable coffee. And since we'll be discussing a lot on sustainable coffee, a lot on traceability systems, I think this is a very important point to see. I've highlighted a few direct to consumer brands on the right image, if you can see. Sleepy Owl, Rage Coffee, Slay, and Blue Tokai. So I have a packet of Blue Tokai with me. I'm not sure if you can see it. So it's the estate name is mentioned from where it's produced. So it's completely traceable back to the farm. So the best example is Slay Coffee in India, which is using the food sign blockchain for providing traceability solutions. And consumers who prefer the online channel or who are buying more through the online channel have knowledge, have awareness regarding the traceability systems. They want to understand where their coffee is coming from, which estate, and it adds an extra layer of premium feel to the coffee, which is being sold in these markets, in the developing markets like India and Southeast Asia. So this is piggybacked. What is the premium coffee market exactly? Depending on, it's piggybacking on the growth of e-commerce. And so e-commerce and online channels are the way to go in the future. And I think this particular segment of the market will grow, and it has huge potential to grow in the next 5 years. To continue on sustainability, we were asked a question in one of the other conferences where, do consumers really demand something that is sustainable, something that is grown without much of a hindrance to the environment? Yes and no, I would say. No, because the general consumer is not aware of issues such as climate change. But yes, because there is a huge emerging set of consumers, and that segment is growing, where there is a lot of preference for premium coffee, where there is a lot of preference for single origin coffee. And these are the customers who will demand traceability systems, who will demand sustainable growing of coffee. At the farmer level is what the change is required, and at the farmer level is what a lot of sustainable practices need to be implemented, especially in the wake of climate change. So the image which you see is that of how suitable the coffee growing area is. This is with respect to Vietnam. So currently you have a few areas, but this agency CIAT, they have proposed that, or they have forecasted that a lot of areas might not become suitable for growing coffee on account of increasing temperatures. And this is a huge challenge as far as coffee is concerned. Now, farmers are the direct people who will be impacted by this. There are several mitigation strategies that have been proposed, including intercropping, which is one of the most favorable kind of a practice that has been suggested. And there are some examples where coffee pepper, coffee durian systems, coffee rattan systems, coffee pepper in India, which is quite popular also. I think the biggest challenge here would be the marketing side of things. Yes, a coffee farmer can grow pepper as an intercrop, but do we have the marketing support required for that? That is the question which we would want to answer. All in all, I think coffee has got a very good future. There are challenges such as climate change that are impending, that are very near to us. But overall, I'm and our team is of projecting a very robust future for coffee in Asia, especially with the implementation of technologies such as traceability, and with the consumer demanding more and more of coffee that is sustainable and something that they can trace back to the farmer. That's it from my presentation. Pasita, over to you.
Thank you very much, Avinash. And since you mentioned smallholder farmers, I'd like our panelist, Leo Purba, Wiryajaya, I like to say your name, Leo. I'd like him to chime in about how a smallholder farmer like himself is dealing with sustainability and traceability issues. What are you using high-tech ways, or are you using, or what system are you using, Leo, in the conduct of your farming business?
Well, you have to remember that the majority of us are smallholder farmers, and only, I would say in Indonesia alone, only less than 5% of coffee farmers have access to direct marketing, market access partner. We are relying more on technology for the 5% of us that can market our product directly to the end user. Yet we are in need of more assistance from like NGOs and other organizations alike to help us become a market access partner. And for instance, just before the pandemic, in the weeks before the pandemic became official, we, through the Rabobank Foundation, we worked in collaboration with USAID and South Pole from Singapore. In our small group alone, it's about 40 families of coffee farmers. We participated in a carbon project, carbon footprint project. And it is proven that even as a small group, we are contributing as a carbon sink, and we receive carbon credit, not just a net zero operation unit. But for us, it's more than just, okay, you have direct marketing. But the challenge is to rely less in the fossil fuel economy that is set in the industry, and how to get premium from a more green economy.
Thank you.
That's my.
Thank you, Leo. At least you're giving us the view from a smallholder farmer. Now I'd like to turn to Vietnam, and with Dave, our next panelist, opinion on his practice in Vietnam. I'd like to welcome Dave Daze again, and maybe he'll give us the idea of sustainability as practiced in Vietnam, where would you say they're smallholder farmers, Dave, or are they, single crop plantations owned by groups? Tell us more about Vietnam and how it's dealing with sustainability.
Thank you, Pasita. I think Vietnam, to some extent, is similar to Indonesia. So we have a lot of smallholder farmers. Average production area is about 1 hectare. The difference between the two countries, I think, is that in Vietnam, it's mainly monocropping. So only coffee trees, Robusta coffee trees, and we have very little diversification. Now, to add to what Mr. Avanish was saying, I think the future for Vietnam is really to go towards intercropping. And I had the opportunity to do a little study for the International Union for Nature Conservation in 2020. And there we find if you would intercrop with avocados, pepper, and durian on the same field, we would take out 20% of the coffee trees. We would replace them with higher yielding varieties, and we would actually increase the yield by at least 50%. Another advantage is that we would save 40% of water for irrigation. A third one is that the farmer's income, could increase from an average of about $4,000 per hectare now for very high yields, that's different from the Indonesian Robusta situation, to about $10,000 per hectare. And we were also talking about carbon sequestration. The potential to sequester more is double actually by intercropping. Now, the downside is, well, not the downside, but the thing we have to think about is how do we finance this whole thing? Because it takes about 10 years to break even from the current situation.
Okay, so now let's look at maybe a high-tech solution. And at this point, I'd like to again introduce Michael of Farmer Connect so that he can tell us, can smallholder farmers take advantage of the Internet of Things or of blockchain and all this use of technology to access markets and to ensure traceability? Michael?
Yes, well, I think there's a fantastic opportunity and with technology, and most importantly to make farmers and smallholder farmers and producers the center of that progress. And it's very important that on that journey of leveraging technology for the good of the entire industry and the supply chain, we don't leave smallholder farmers and producers aside, that we don't, take the data and run with it and create value outside and only outside of the origin countries. But there is definitely a lot of potential in leveraging technology to do so and to create actually additional value. And it's about creating additional shared value. Arguably the use of technology like blockchain, which we use at Farmer Connect, is key, to ensure authenticity, to ease claim of sustainability for the entire supply chain. This technology gives consumers the confidence in the brands we work with, and it's vital. I would say there are also other technologies on the side, and specifically the ones that we're using at the origin with our product Farmer ID, another technology called self-sovereign identity, so SSI, and sorry for the acronyms in the high tech, but it's what the question is about. And really that allows farmers to connect digitally to the agricultural supply chain, to get proof of their income, to safely store and manage a digital version of their transaction receipt, certification, all in one place. And to be the owner of that data and to manage how that data will then travel and how eventually that data will be monetized. So, I often say that there's a threat in a way with technology of doing a sort of a neo-colonialism by bringing that technology and then sucking out all the value that is created by making that data available. And this is why Farmer Connect is called Farmer Connect. So it's Farmer Connect. So obviously it's connectivity and technology, but it's to create added value and creating shared value. Probably one of the related questions to that is, when you generated data, how this data can be trusted, because it's one thing to collect the data, but how do you ensure the data is trusted and trustworthy? And this is all about the controlled access to that data and to the data points that are validated and processed. This is why, again, blockchain is of a real advantage in managing that ecosystem of partners, because, you know, all the way from the farmer to the consumers, there's many people in between. And this is why blockchain really helps organizing that governance and that access and security of information. So I think technology is exciting. Technology that creates value is even more exciting, and technology that creates value and trust is where the sky is the limit to generate shared value across the board.
Okay, we'll go back to that in a bit, but in the meantime, I want to ask Avinash, do consumers care? I mean, you showed some examples of some coffee marks, if you will. And before you answer that, I want to remind our listeners, our viewers, to send their questions over in the Q&A box, chat box, or comment box, because these will be answered by our panelists as we see the questions. Anyway, Avinash, please help us understand. I mean, for a smallholder farmer to understand this high-tech way of getting to customers, who's going to get my data? I mean, is this important to the consumer?
In terms of, I mean, there are two sides to this. So consumer is not a straight-jacketed term, right? There are many segments within consumers who demand different things. So there are one sets of customers who are just, you just want to go to a nearby Starbucks and drink your coffee. That's all. I'm happy. But there are other sets of customers who are looking at several angles to how sustainable is the product being consumed by them. How did the producer of the product get good returns from it? Lot of such things are being thought by a smaller set of customers, and those sets of customers, or the number of those customers, are increasing year on year, which is a very positive signal. And I think that is where we should look at this market. Yes, right now it's still probably a niche segment that we are looking at, who demand that my product is traceable. I need to know who produced this. However, that segment is growing year on year, and we can expect that in future, that will occupy a significant share of the market. And I think that's where the market is headed in coffee. A lot of commodities, but specifically in coffee, which is kind of very close to so many people's hearts.
That's right. And you can call it like wine, where you look at traceability because of the taste, etc. But with coffee, there's a more social angle, if you will. And that's where I go back to Leo, because I know that Leo is involved with a lot of farmers. And like you said, you're a group of 40. And how adaptable do you think they'll be to use high technology or blockchain to be able to ensure sustainability of all their farms? Leo, do you have? Yes, Michael.
Pasita, do you allow me to interrupt? I'm a bit rude, but I wanted to jump on what Avinash said, because there's a very interesting study that's just come out from Deloitte. Deloitte has been measuring and running quite a wide survey before the pandemic on those topics, and they just run it again after, and we see quantifiable acceleration of that. And I just got the extract of it, where a third of consumers, so we're talking really a third of consumers, are really being highly engaged now with adopting a more sustainable lifestyle. And equally important, 28% of consumers have stopped buying certain products due to ethical or environmental concerns. And if you look at that on specifically on Gen Z, so the youth, the younger ones, it moves up to 50%. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, there's really a huge acceleration there, which now, is equally also supported by the fact that 50% of people are willing to pay more for that. So there are still people driven by promotion and price, but now it's on par with people willing to pay more. So I think we're seeing a quantifiable acceleration of that market demand.
Okay.
So sorry to interrupt, but I just want to
Thank you,
that
Michael.
summary.
And I'm sure that we can hear from Indonesia and Vietnam, and I'll start with Leo, because I know that I want to understand how farmers on the receiving end of this technology will relate to it as a way to increase value and to be more sustainable. Leo? And then I'll call on Dave.
Yeah. My background is electrical engineering, and anytime there's technology involved, I'm always excited about it. The answer is yes. Yeah, it does help farmers. Farmers as actors, we do have our limitations. However, nowadays you see everyone, we use smartphones. Even when we are farming, we use smartphones. Even smallholder farmers, they have some sort of smartphone with them. And almost everyone participating in social media, which is instrumental in streamlining or in dissemination of any information, and it is instrumental in achieving transparency across the board. So even with some limitation that we have as smallholder coffee farmers, we like to participate using technology to establish traceability. And like what I mentioned before in the carbon footprint project, they actually enable smallholder farmers to fill out the forms and fill out the audit online initially before the official audit comes in. So there's an app online. You just have to access it. It's coolfarmtool.org, and it helps establish, through questionnaires, one by one. It's so easy. You can just have a farmer sit in front of a smartphone, answer questions one by one through the app, which is free, available to any farmers globally. And then that will establish, oh, okay, I can see that my coffee is eco-friendly. My farming practice is already the best farming practices. So yeah, to answer that question, we are open to be using more and more technology.
Thank you. It's looking good. So Dave, I want you to chime in on sustainability in Vietnam, given that you now have to go to intercrops. How is this all going to play out, given the COVID restrictions, as we were talking earlier in the afternoon or earlier today?
Well, COVID is bringing along quite a bit of difficulties, I think. Currently, while we speak, Vietnam, in many parts of the country, we are in a full lockdown. We're not allowed to go out for essentials even, so we are supposed to go online shopping. Now you can imagine in farms, in the rural communities, I'm afraid farmers at the moment do not have access to agro-inputs. It's gonna get worse, we assume, or we expect, because during the harvest in October, November, we need helping hands. Those working forces, they come from central Vietnam, but we're not allowed to travel. Third point is that if we are able, or if we will be able to harvest, can we actually bring the coffee to the export factory, to the processing factories down in the south of the country? If not, farmers will have to keep their coffee. Maybe they can't even sell. And if they keep, it's not stored on the proper conditions. So this may affect coffee quality. And then once we are at the point, if we have coffee in our warehouses in Saigon, will we be able to ship it? Because currently there is a shortage of containers. The freight price is 8 to 10-fold higher than pre-COVID. So I am not sure what we can realistically do about this. But it brings me maybe to another point where, as roasting and retail companies, we may have to look into diversifying our sources for buying. It was mentioned earlier that in Asia, Indonesia and Vietnam are very high export countries, but I see potential for the Philippines, for example. So I think we need to take that element into account.
Thank you. And I think just like the Philippines, if I may volunteer my own opinion here, is that we're thriving on local consumption. There is a big local market because we haven't had enough, as you know, Dave, we haven't had enough to even export. So things are sort of leveling off. You know, maybe Vietnam will use less chemical inputs. Maybe Indonesia will have more organic farmers catering to their domestic market as well, with a big population of Indonesia. So Avinash, do you see this shifting in Asia, aside from India and China? How do you see the Southeast Asian consumers of coffee?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think it's a growing market. So even if you see the numbers, it's growing at a very robust rate. The entirety of Southeast Asia, which we classify as the rest of Asia Pacific, which is mostly Southeast Asia. 90% of that is in fact Southeast Asia. Yeah, like I said in my presentation as well, it's slowly shifting from a coffee shop-based consumption to a home-based consumption, which is also very important, you know, in the context of this entire webinar as well, since we're talking about technology and since we are, you know, a lot of emphasis on sustainability. It is a high probability that the consumer sitting and drinking coffee at home is going to consume, you know, sustainable coffee, rather than a person who is hopping into coffee shops. And I think this is the most significant development as far as we observe for Southeast Asia, where we see a lot of in-home consumption, and that is again aided by the, you know, COVID pandemic as well. And you know, since we had a lot of part of the last year where, you know, none of the food service channels were open, and so in-home consumption has substituted that, and you know, that's the reason why we sustained that growth, or the coffee market sustained that growth in 2020. And I'm sure that this trend is also going to continue later on into the next 5 years.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good for coffee, although it doesn't sound good right now for farmers, but I think they will start to level off and seek their own level of production, maybe, Dave. And, you know, instead of producing 5 tons per hectare, maybe it will level off if there are no inputs, but they might be slowly converting to organic. So may I ask Michael again, and you see my wide smile because of organic. Leo and I are great believers in the organic coffee production. And that's what I want to ask Michael. Michael, is there a way that your technology can find us an organic farmer in Southeast Asia with the right priced coffee? And this is going to be a B2C or a C2C transaction. Michael?
So Farmer Connect is not yet a marketplace. So we're not there yet. But we do collect a lot of data, and we do collect a lot of data sources. So obviously, we started probably more on the details behind the produce and the volumes, the prices, and the certification. But then we're moving towards more sustainability metrics as our clients are asking more and more of that. And it's also a great way to kind of showcase, you know, the great practices that are done on the ground, specifically the agricultural practices when it comes to organic, as you just mentioned, but also in terms of water usage, deforestation-free, child labor, carbon intake. So all of that is another data set that we can plug in and track, and therefore highlight the best practices and the good practices of local farmers. So we can do that. I think it's equally important to obviously provide the opportunity for farmers to find their market directly, but also since Farmer Connect was built on the idea of creating a collaborative ecosystem for all players, because if there's no incentive to everyone on the chain, then things are not moving at the pace we want. And you've told me in the intro that, you know, there are a lot of traders on that event. And so I want to point out, you know, potentially the benefits of of doing that for them, because it might not be totally clear on what it brings to the trading community. There are definitely an opportunity with traceability and digital transformation to cut some of the cost of collecting, storing, transmitting data. That's for sure. I mean, when you move from analog to digital, there's also an opportunity to unlock the value of end-to-end supply chain data that brings value, that brings premium to them, that links to premium value of traceable coffee and for us also cocoa. So I think it's very important to highlight those benefits also for the people who are listening to us in the trading community, because they should be part of that effort as well. Obviously, we can talk about direct to consumer and how volumes can shift directly from farmers to consumers, and that's a good development. But there are also the big volumes and everything that the entire industry is driving. So by highlighting potentially those benefits, we can get to greater scale, greater volume, greater transformation.
Thank you, Michael. And I can see that with this session, our attendees, our viewers, our listeners are getting a lot of ideas about what kind of coffee to brew at home. Because as Avinash said, more people will be buying online using e-commerce and brewing it, not maybe going to a cafe, but brewing it at home. So with this trend that we see in the next 5 years, I'd like to, we're almost out of time. So I want to get your parting shots, if you will. As a consumer, what is a consumer to look for? What is a consumer to look for in a coffee bag, or where can he or she find that information? And again, I tell our attendees and viewers, please put your questions in and our panelists will answer them in a little while. So I'm going to make a round and start with Dave. And so what is your advice to the consumers who are looking for Vietnamese coffee?
It's a very good question, Pasita. When I'm walking around in Europe and I ask about Vietnamese coffee, then the interesting answer I get is, it's more like a question, is Vietnam producing coffee? We didn't know that. So that's one element. But what I think is important is that farmers understand what is behind the label, because I know that many of my friends over there, they are buying all these labels, but I also know the other side in the field. And what I think we are missing in many discussions about sustainability is, how can we close the living income gap? Don't we have to look at the coffee price as the basic first? And I don't believe that we can create a sustainable environment if the farmer is not receiving a fair price for its product. The other questions with the labels I have is, if the consumer pays a premium, who's actually receiving that premium? The farmer often receives only a very small share, especially for the Vietnamese Robusta farmers. So I think we need to reflect a little bit further about labeling, certification in relation to sustainability and traceability.
Thank you, Dave. How about Leo? How do you see Indonesian coffee? The future of your group of farmers. Are they going to stick it out in the same trade or in the same farming coffee for the long haul? How do you see the sustainability of your farmers in Sumatra, for example?
In the end, this is what we choose to be. As a farmer, we choose to stay behind at the villages in the mountain range and farm coffee. This is our livelihood. And thanks to many great organizations, and we can establish ourselves online now. And we can have buyers directly buy from us. Unfortunately, that's not the case for 95% other smallholder coffee farmers. What I would like to see going forward is accountability throughout the value chain. And like Dave mentioned earlier, if an end user buyer in Europe, North America, they buy a package of coffee, it's on the labeling, we will give X amount of premium to coffee farmers. How much actually goes to the coffee farmer? And with that, what I would like to see, what everybody would like to see, is more accountability across the board, across the value chain. This way, farmers who are seeking out, because we bear the brunt of the risk. If a farmer, this is our livelihood. If we experience failed crop, this is our livelihood. When COVID hit, big companies may reduce their costs, their spending, but for us, we don't have anything else to reduce costs and everything.
But it's good. It's good to know that you're going to be there for the long haul. And I want to ask Michael again, like you work with different coffee players and you have a great overview of what's happening. Why do you believe there's an increased drive for traceability in coffee over the last couple of years? Michael.
I think I think it's linked back to what I've said about the movement of consumer demand, and it's also linked to exactly what you said about the consumer shift and the in-home consumption as well. So if you take the coffee bags that I've just showed you in the beginning, so both the Vietnam and the Sumatra, where we have our product featured. When you're at home, when you're receiving those bags, when you bring your coffee yourself, you have a bit of a quality time with that product, right? So on that product, and then you see the usual claims, but then at the back, then you're starting to see new things like a little bit of a story and the QR code there that tells you or that engages you to actually learn what's behind the product. And if you actually flash the QR code, so take your phone and do that, and actually all of you on this can try.
Let me do that. Let me
yourself.
do that. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you can actually tell the story.
So try and do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't very successful, but I think we can do that. What we can do, Michael, is
yes. And then if you do that, then you will land on the page that will exactly show you the journey of the product. And then my point here is to say that obviously you can learn about the journey of the product, but the first step towards accountability that Leo talked about and that we're trying to do at Farmer Connect is to contribute to some sustainability project on the ground. So that brand specifically is supporting some sustainability project on the ground that supports the environment and habitats of orangutan in Sumatra, and you as a consumer can contribute to that. So again, we're asking the consumers to contribute. So we're not there yet in terms of giving full transparency or what's going to go back to the farmer themselves, but still is contributing to the local community and to the origin country. So I think we're making a step towards bringing more value back to the origin. I don't think we're there yet in terms of food transparency and showing the premium, but when you engage in that, when you contribute as a consumer with $1 or $2, then we trace back with equal trust and security the payment down to the local projects. So that technology exists. We bridge the gap and we humanize consumption in the way, because we bring faces to behind the product, and we create that link. So hopefully
Michael,
one day Leo will get FaceTime
I'm sure we can flash
or WhatsApp calls with consumers.
We can flash the QR code for our viewers to try. We will find a way to do that. And that's why I'm thinking, as Leo said, when you pay a premium, how much of it really goes to the farmer? And Dave echoed it as well. So while we address traceability, is traceability the only answer for the sustainability of the coffee producers in Asia? And Avinash, I'd like you to take a crack at that.
I would say it's one of the important ways, or one of the most useful ways in which farmers can be ensured of a fair price. It's also about disintermediation, as Dave was talking about the different intermediaries in the value chain. I think technology presents an answer to kind of a disintermediation of the entire value chain in terms of uh, having lesser number of people, or even if there are people, they perform activities that are essential to the coffee value chain. I think that is one important critical step, is what I feel could lead to a better price for the farmer, and technology will only enable that. And another important point, I think, is the branding of Asian coffee, which has not been that great. I would say, like Dave said, no one knows about Vietnam coffee. Uh, we do have some information. If you see a market like India, we have information on Sumatran coffee. We do get a few brands here. We have extensively, information on South American coffee. For instance, we have Colombian coffee coming here. We do have local uh, coffee, I would say, hotspots, which Coorg, Chikmagalur. These are coffee hotspots in India. We have Chikmagalur coffee, but we have never put the effort in branding the geography of coffees, is what I think, at a global level. And I think that needs to change, and there is a lot of scope for improvement there. I'll take just one example from tea, which is Darjeeling tea, which is quite
Mm-hmm.
popular all over the world, here in India as well. And so that is a brand in itself. And I don't see a coffee brand that is as good as that having as much brand value as Darjeeling tea. I think that's where, in terms of coffee associations, we should head. Especially, I think that's a huge scope for improvement in terms of branding of Asian coffee as a whole.
Thank you. And on that note, I think that sustainability can really be a joint effort of farmers going back to probably more sustainable farm practices, maybe of blockchain and other means of technology to actually make the farmer get more of the fair value paid by the consumer. So we're seeing transparency all throughout the value chain. So if you gentlemen agree with what I said about traceability being part of the recipe for sustainability, if you had one more wish, what would it be? So let's have another round while our viewers can still shoot their questions. Now that we know there's traceability, what is the only other thing on your wish list to make sure that this coffee industry will be sustainable in Asia? Go for it, Dave.
Difficult one, but I think it's more equally distributing the value shares, the margins in the supply chain. And I mentioned it already, a decent price, closing the living income gap.
Thank you. Leo?
Yep, I agree with Dave. It has to be fair. Doesn't mean that everybody gets the same share, but it just has to be fair. And
Okay.
for us, smallholder farmers, we just want to put it improving quality. With improved quality, there'll be some premium added.
Better price. Yes. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's to the point, creating shared value, so additional shared value that is evenly shared across the board. And I do believe technology is a great way to accelerate that.
Thank you. And Avinash, of course, please, what is your other wish?
I would say, like, I would echo the sentiments of Leo and Dave, because they're right on the ground. I think one important enabler for that is technology, and Michael has already pointed that out. So I think it should all come together for the benefit of the farmers, because unless the producer is, rightfully rewarded, I don't think we can question, or we can ask the question of sustainability ever.
And my answer as a consumer would be, please tell the consumers where the coffee is from and how much the farmer got paid for it. I think transparency will, of course, ensure traceability and ultimately sustainability. So we'll round it up. Thank you gentlemen, for your insights and your wonderful thoughts on and suggestions on making sure that coffee will be sustainable for a very, very long time in this part of the world. Thank you very much and good morning to everyone.